Welcome to the Enneagram Summit for the Helping Profession. I'm the host of the summit, Michelle Joy. I'm the founder of the Developmental Enneagram for Couples. And today we have with us Katherine Fauvre, who's the creator of Tritype and Stackings, is the only triple certified Enneagram teacher through Palmer Daniels, Riso Hudson, and Hurley Donson to attend intensives with both Oscar Ichazo and Claudio Naranjo, the latter of who validated her 1994 instinctual subtypes research. An IEA accredited professional with distinction, Katherine also served on the IEA board in 1997 to 1999. In 2023, Katherine was inducted into the Marquis Who's Who Biographical Registry and named IAOTP Top Enneagram Coach of the Year. In 2024, she was honored as an Empowered Woman of the Year. Her book released in November, and it's called The Enneagram Instinctual Subtypes 2.0, Advanced Instincts, Subtypes, Countertypes, and Stacking. And this summer, her second book called Tritype Advantage 2.0, Advanced Types, Tritypes, and Tristar will also be released. And you can learn more about Katherine at katherinefauvre.com or enneagramtritypetest.com. So, and Katherine's with us to talk about Enneagram and neurodiversity, unmasking the types and the role of neurodivergence in common mistypings. So, welcome, Katherine. Thank you for being here.
Hi, sure. I'm happy to be here and share this information. I studied neurodiversity for 43 years, and then I found the Enneagram 40 years ago, and I immediately correlated them as to how they impacted one another for sure.
Oh, it's so important. The term neurodivergence, some people may have not heard of it, but it's definitely a hot topic these days in the therapeutic world. A good place to start, I think, is if you could explain what neurodivergence is.
Yes.
Go from there.
At one point, they called any type of neurodivergence as minimal brain dysfunction, in particular ADD and ADHD. They've since changed the terminology. And because of this focus on understanding our individuality, this whole generation is very much interested in that. There's kind of a reframing of it. And I always thought it should be reframed. I researched it just like I did the Enneagram because I had it. I didn't even know that, but my son was tested when he was 6. And so I was like 29. And I said, well, wait, I do that. And they said, oh, well, it doesn't go away. We just learn how to adapt. So neurodivergence came into being much like I noticed 40 years ago, actually, this year. But there was obviously gifts that came with each type of lens of perception that we had biologically, just like each Enneagram type has an incredible skill or ability to track things that the other types don't. So neurodivergent is just seeing the variety of the way the brain can come together in different types of individuals, and they can have 3 possible examples like ADHD. They might also be OCD, and they might also struggle with not just time management, but also somewhat on the autism spectrum. Now, they were noticed the first, but other people were just told they were distractible or they were lazy, and we'll focus on ADHD most today. But it's a natural way that we can look at the core fear and the idealized image of each Enneagram type and the fear that goes with that. And then what happens when you mix it with one or more of those traits. And I have the combination of the dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia with the ADHD, and I have pattern recognition. So it's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary gift using it to research. It's not in the way otherwise, because I'm noticing, oh yeah, why is that person doing that? Why is the lawnmower? Why did they not go in the same pattern? Well, that doesn't do so well when you're in school. But if you're tracking human behavior, it's a real asset because you're just doing it naturally. You're not trying to. So that would be an example of a struggle, like writing. Once we had to write in ink, I'd have to start all over because I'd reverse the letters, I'd reverse the numbers. The same with typing. Computers are much better, but I didn't have those growing up. And so that's what we're talking about today. And there's common mistypings that I want to mention, maybe first and foremost.
Mhm.
I think.
Sure. And I just want to throw in, how sometimes there's struggles in relationships
Oh,
and
yeah.
it just goes on and on and on. And we can't, it's like, oh, that's because, and that one person says, I identify as neurodivergent. Okay, that's why I have such blind spots when it comes to reading your facial cues or offering empathy, and the partner's so frustrated thinking, you're not doing this because you don't care, because you don't want to, rather than, this person identifies the neurodivergent scale.
Right. And I had studied that beginning with the birth of my son, which was like 6 years earlier. And understanding the why and the emotional content was huge for me, because when you're trying to teach a child how to behave and be responsible and they break the rule, you have to understand, are they doing it because they don't respect the rule, or they don't respect you, or they just enthusiastically pursuing something that interests them, or do
Mhm,
they feel kind of trapped and need to get away? Well, that varies with type as well. And
mhm.
introversion and extroversion. I use it with the Myers-Briggs. That's a great point.
Yeah. And one of the things that you've said is core Enneagram motivations can be masked or distorted by sensory sensitivities, processing differences, and atypical relationship patterns. And you notice that through your research, your qualitative research, and your live panel work. Can you say more about how you notice that?
Well, first, when I learned about ADHD, and I was trying and being on the autism spectrum, they didn't call it that back then, as I mentioned. I wanted to help my son just have all the possible options he could have. And there was really nothing out there. It was just more like, this is the problem child in the classroom. And you have to have strong discipline for them to behave. Well, that never worked with me. I would just lose respect if it was unfair. But if there was a teacher that knew I meant well and kind of had me do things, I'd be the monitor, so I'd be able to, walk and go to the principal's office, come back and pay attention again, then I thrive. So the point being that I just started collecting the data. I like qualitative research. And I went to everything that was available in the early 80s. And the only thing they had found, and this was from the parents, was that we all, with whatever our issue is that's diverse, we go into overwhelm. And
Mm,
that's when we all get controlling. And it's also it's like when we're a deer in the headlights. Like even working with people on my book, the ones that are putting it in the form and the shape, I know exactly how it can look. But doing it and remembering where I am in time and space can be tough. I also have the right left imbalance. Now, that can seem like a real handicap, except I feel right and left. I can't see right and left. And I have adaptations for that. But I thought, wow, I'm just, an idiot. I gotta not have that be a problem. And so I created adaptations. Okay, if you miss a turnoff, you just create a square, which is a circle, and it puts you right back to where you got lost. Now they said that's an adaptation, but a lot of people don't know that. I taught that to my boys growing up, who
mm,
also have it, and my brothers, who also have it in varying degrees. So when I found the Enneagram, I didn't start formally researching until I started the Enneagram in 1985, but then it was 1994 that I started the research. So part of what I collected was, do you have any learning disabilities or ways that it was hard for you in school? And then I thought, well, okay, this is how they can change the impression of the type. And a lot of people, for example, are told they're a 7, or they self type as a 7 if they have ADD and ADHD in particular, because you can start things if you're interested, but you get distracted. So finishing things is a real problem. Now, then the compensating kind of psychological issue is then you can have low self-esteem because you don't respect what you can or can't do. Like I
mhm,
had to play after school. I didn't sit down and do my homework. But then I could also fly by the seat of my pants and figure things out, and a way to get around things. And so it was never even noticed in me. They just thought I was really smart, but like deliberately not following the rules. But that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't quite true. I might not be listening when the rules were stated because there was something else like the lawnmower capturing my attention, and rules were pretty boring anyhow. So I haven't done a formal study of the two specifically, but I did gather all that data. And so for the last 31 years, I've been working with that in tandem with the Enneagram typing and Myers-Briggs and micro expressions. And you're so right about the micro expressions, because you can learn to teach a parent to see their child's confusion over disgust or contempt, like they don't want to do that, whatever it is, versus, wait, what didn't I do? And we all can go into a blind state. And by that, I mean snowblind, where we either can't see something, remember something, or do something because of that overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
What helps more than anything is helping individuals discover their gifts that other people don't have. I had a teacher tell me when I was 11 that I had an extraordinary ability to read situations and people, and I just needed to understand it rather than thinking everybody had my point of view. I thought people were lying all the time. So wait, we were there together. How could you say that? Aren't you like lying? And they said, oh, this is what I noticed. And that's very true. We notice and track different things.
Mm-hmm.
She helped me understand that. And what she thought was I got in trouble, by the way. That's why I was even meeting with this teacher after school, because there were a few of us that were having fun kind of reorganizing a classroom, which didn't go over real well. We thought it would be funny. And as a result, I, being an 8, took the punishment for all 3 of us. It wasn't even my idea, but I thought, yeah, they can't take it. She's the president of the elementary school, and she's a shy, quiet 9. Yeah, she won't be able to handle it. I'll just say I did all of it.
Mm-hmm.
The 5th grade teacher that we were in together knew that I was the type to take responsibility for the weak or the people that didn't feel powerful. And he said, well, wait, what do you think is weak about these people? And I said, well, she can't have her reputation ruined as the president of the school. She's taken her, kindergarten to 6th grade to get to this point. And as a result, as a result, he understood a lot of my gifts. I read the stories out of order, but it wasn't to get away with something. It was because I was interested on a different story. And since we're using ADHD as the lead piece here, he recognized that the way we were supposed to read these stories that were on a little laminated card and then color in our answers and then progress, that just didn't work for me, because I wanted to read about airplanes before I wanted to read about flowers or whatever the topic was, or spaceships. And that was at the highest level of reading, spaceship. Well, I was very interested in spaceships in the very beginning. So when he realized that I was self-testing for the right information, you can read them in any order you want, but he understood the principle of teaching, and he was an ESFP. And so he really understood the human part of it. Whereas if he had been an ISTJ, I would have been in big trouble because it was not following the procedure. And if I had a 1 teacher that was an ISTJ, that would be a big deal, because it would be going against her core fears, her idealized images of doing what's right and perfection and following the order. So he was a real asset to me. And that's what we as parents and teachers and friends and spouses and therapists, all of us can help understand the other if we can read the emotion and understand what's personal and what's not.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those examples, Catherine. It really helps paint the picture of what you're talking about. So neurodivergent traits can influence how the 9 Enneagram patterns are expressed and understood. And what you were saying earlier is that common mistypings can occur because we can confuse the neurodivergent coping mechanisms or communication styles with Enneagram pattern structure.
Yeah.
What would you say more about that, please?
Yeah, that's perfect, because we have these idealized images and these core fears. And if our idealized images, one of them is I'm this, and like I'm smart, and yet I'm transposing numbers, or I'm reversing the greater than, less than symbol. I have all the right answers, but I've made the symbol go the wrong way. So enough so that I didn't have B's and D's backwards, but it was, or P's, but it was clearly all the right answers. So our defense mechanism shows up to protect us, but in between there's a coping mechanism that we're trying to make it okay. But if we can't make it okay, if we can't cope, then our defense strategy comes in and we get defensive, we get assertive, we get short, or we just walk away, or we blame the other person, because we cannot let our idealized image be destroyed, because then who are we? And this happens to all types, but the type itself could have a problem. Like people that are OCD will think they're ones, but OCD is about having to do it a certain way, or you'll get in trouble, or something will be wrong, or you'll feel distress. Whereas the perfectionism of one, it gives brilliance to their being. It's not about, oh, I'll get in trouble. It's like, I feel better when I make it perfect. I need it this way. So that can help people that are mistyping and they don't really relate to the issues of the type, the passion and fixation and conviction, because that's not their lead type. And it also applies to tritype, of course, because whatever those three types believe, their idealized images merge, and what they share in common becomes the thing that must be maintained. And their core fears merge, then that shows why one person might be upset one way with the same configuration and another totally different. And people that have selective mutism, for example, that's another one, where if they're with their family that they see every day, they can talk and, get up frustrated or laugh or be happy and not have a problem. But it runs in families and it's a right brain processing problem. But if they're in groups, their anxiety is so great, they just don't talk. They usually have someone who talks for them. Now that runs in my family. I had a mother that way and a brother that way, and one sort of that way, because there's all variables. And then some of us had the dyslexia and some of us had the ADHD. My dad had ADHD. So you're going to see it if you know what to look for. But it's like, we know that the 4, for example, has an idealized image that they must be unique. You must do something that's exclusive. Like my brother, instead of getting regular braces when it was brand new and just at the cutting edge level, got the removable, the earliest version of Invisalign to correct his teeth, because he just couldn't even tolerate braces on his face. That'd be too common. And all these things are just simple little things that we need. But he also has the dyslexia. And trying to conceal that is hard if you have it to such a degree that it can be seen in your words and your writing and your sequencing. That's another problem. Some people are really good at sequencing if they're an ISTJ, but boy, do they flip out if things are not done A, B, C, D. Whereas intuitives take it from here, from here, from here, from here, and then create something. But if it's A, B, C, D, it's like, oh, I can't pay attention, especially if they're ADHD, because they want to know their answer before they get the next step, the next step. They want to jump to the step that they don't know or they don't understand.
Yeah.
So I find all of them extremely important. And then you use the gift of the type to help them improve their self-image and realize then what they can do instead. Maybe I'm always going to need someone that checks my editing. And I do. I could check it 7 times and each time see the reverse number, or there could be double words and I won't see it because my brain just goes like, well, that's what should be there when I wrote it. I didn't mean to have 2 words, so I don't see 2 words. And we can do a lot of those things, but I have the pattern recognition that enables me to know just what I need to do. Now, I do have a high IQ, but that's also why I was frustrating to teachers, that's why they thought it was more like, was I just being disobedient and not conforming? And as a 478, I wasn't great at conforming, but I was great at cooperation. But that's being involved rather than being told, do this, do that. I go, time out, why that? And several types will do that. The 8 will do it and just, in a way, not comply. The 9 will pretend to comply and not comply. But the counterphobic 6 will get punchy.
Mm-hmm.
Their questions won't be like, wait a minute, why are we doing that? Isn't that like a stupid rule? That doesn't even work anymore. Why do we have that rule? That's 8. Whereas the 6 would be more like, well, wait, and look for the authority to grant their, in a way, permission to break the rule. Whereas the 8 goes, yeah, I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. But we're not going to not do things that'll put us in conflict if we can avoid it. But we're not afraid. We just think it's stupid. And so that's why the fear comes up it's such a key issue with all the types. And it's the collection of fears, not a single fear. And that's what my research revealed, that the collection of idealized images for each type, the collection of fears. But I'd say people with neurodiversity have some sort of distortion in their self-image based on the way they didn't fit into their classroom, their family, and like some families overdid it. Oh, you have this problem. And a lot of kids, I don't want to go to special ed. And there are other ways to handle it. Working with special ed where the child just gets extra time or can take a test differently rather than sitting in another room, being separate from kids, like especially social 6s, they hate that. But most social types, they're not going to sit in a room for people that need to learn differently because that makes them different. And if they need to be the same, they don't like it.
Well, I think this conversation is important for so many reasons, but you're really bringing up a lot of the nuances that we need to pay attention to. So when we're especially being careful with typing, because it is easy for somebody who's not kind of educated in what you're talking about to say, oh, OCD must be type 1, you have anxiety, must be type 6, and make those assumptions. But you're really talking about neurodivergence is a really important lens to also be looking at people through and taking that into consideration when we're typing. For example, you mentioned that there are shutdown behaviors, and people could think, oh, it might be a 5 or a 9. That looks like that is a withdrawal type, when instead it can really be explained through neurodivergent traits.
Right, because we're on tilt, like, a game that's on tilt, it just stops working. And some people, when that discomfort comes up, get angry and might maybe even mean to push people away, to not find that more hidden fear. And other people just back away. They maybe have demand lag, and if someone asks for an answer to something, they can't see or answer anything.
Mm-hmm.
Where we are then is like the Hornevians. Does the person move towards, away, or against? And a lot of times we'll see the against in the 3, the 6 and 8, and it's just natural. The 7 can do it, but they'll get around it more. The counterphobic 6 with 3, 6, 8 is going to push back because they can't stand the anxiety building, so they're going to push to see what really comes up so they get it over with. Whereas the phobic 6 is going, oh yeah, I'm not going to do that. And they're going to energetically move away. So they're more like a withdrawn. And the 7 gets around. The 1 tries harder, works harder. And let me tell you, like a 1 with ADHD, wow, it amplifies the rigidity because, wait, I don't understand that. I've got to learn more. I've got to do more. They get very, very rigid with themselves and others, like parents that are 1s with ADHD or ADD, either version, and then their child has it. They're trying to help the child be as rigid as they are, and the child's not a rigid type. They're a 7, and they can't function. And yet the parents trying very hard to give the child what they need, because they don't want them to suffer what they suffered. They want to improve the situation so their child is better. But on the other side, the 1 with the, first that internal criticism and the ability to, concentrate on making a task perfected, that creates a paralysis for them too. And they might question in the very beginning if they're a 1 or 6. And if they have both in the Tritype, let me tell you, it's going to be hard. But the gift is they have this elevated kind of ethical insight where they're focused on what is the ideal way a problem can be handled, because they've experienced it themselves, and therefore they can extend that to others. And some people say, well, you can't be a 1, you're not that rigid. And they'll say, well, listen, rigidity didn't work for other people. It worked for me, but not other people. So that's where the lived experience, when all of us have that type of empathy, it's extraordinary, because that part of us stops, like the 8 going, being, talk to the hand. That goes away if you've had learning disabilities, because you say, yeah, I hate that in myself. I used to feel like I was weak and pathetic, and I couldn't let anybody know that. Or you can have extra kindness and benevolence for other people that are struggling. And the 8 makes the distinction. Are you acting weak to get your way? Or are you truly weak and in need of support? And so an 8 that has any of the neurodiversity, and they know how to work with it, actually becomes extraordinarily benevolent. And, like with the 2, they're so interpersonal, but their fear is of not having value or use in a way that's needed on an emotional level. So when they have ADD or ADHD, it amplifies for them. They're reading social signals properly. They might think, oh, well, this is needed. Oh, I didn't notice the angry face, but I want to give them this thing. They don't know what they're doing. And so they energetically and emotionally want to come in and help. Like I once had my job at this weekend away was to cut the vegetables, and I was cutting them, and a 2 came behind me and put her hands right over mine and was cutting. And I just looked at her and I said, am I cutting them wrong? And she goes, oh, no, I just wanted to help. And she didn't even realize she was doing it. It was very sweet. And of course, she did cut really nicely. And that's another thing. If you have ADHD, you don't want to do things all methodical like that. You want to, let's just chop them up and let's throw them in the blender and make it easier. But she had no recognition. She just came behind. Oh, she goes, oh, that's what I do with my grandchildren. I go, yeah, but I'm like 40 years old when this happened. And she said, yeah, I'm not sure why I did it, but I just like to help people. And yeah, that can cause them problems. People can feel like, wait, don't invade my space. Let me do it. Or a little child, let me do it. And they have to learn to do that, of course, with their children. But the gift is this exceptional emotional intuition. And that because it's heartfelt, they can just say, oh, yeah, I can see that you don't like it. I care about you. How can I help you? What would help you? Like not even mentioning it. And then it can just, in each case, we want to prevent the power struggle. And that happens with every type, every instinct, every problem that we have, because we go into power mode, all of us, even if the power is withdrawing, in order to handle a problem. And when a 2 does that, then the person or the child goes, oh, like when I didn't get mad at the woman putting her hands, but my first instinct was, wait, I spilled the milk every time I was a little kid, and my job was to pour the milk at dinner time. I'd always get distracted and pour some of it. So I could have been like defensive. I can do it, even if it's 40. But I just thought, oh, she doesn't even know she's doing it. And how did I know that? The expression on her face. And that's why getting the right type, or if you don't have the right type, just reading whether someone looks sad, angry, disapproving, contemptuous, or if they're inquiring and interested. But when we're in defense, that's hard to do. Now, like with the 3 who has ADD, wow, that confuses them because they must be the best. And when they find something they're not the best at, everything goes into covering it and having, and the 7 does this too in a way. There'll be ways that they distract people from what they're asking for and divert, but the 3 will do that with a performance, doing something else. Oh, that was someone else was supposed to do that part. Yeah, let me fix that. Whereas they might have spent hours trying to get things sequenced properly so that something flowed the way it should in business or in any field. They could be an architect with all the details, or they could be someone creating an event and losing details. Wait, I depended on Sally to tell John that the chairs needed to be there at that time. And so, but the systemization, the gift of the 3 with ADHD is they'll figure out master meta plans of how to produce something, how to make something happen, especially with their weakness. But if they don't know that's their weakness, they just don't like it, they'll be angry and irritable with people that are not helping them with their insecurity. Whereas I spent many years in businesses working with the 3 that can't delegate because they're afraid of looking bad. But if you teach them, okay, this is your strength, this is your weakness, and just make sure you choose the right person that can do that thing that you're not good at, and then it'll work. And it does, but everything's a secret for all 9 types until they know what they're dealing with. Like with the 3, it becomes just a system that's extraordinary, especially if the 3 has 1. And it's fun if they have 3, 7, 1. But like with the 4, with the idealized image, as I mentioned earlier, it's so shameful for them to have ADD. Usually they don't identify with ADHD because they're a withdrawn type, but it's just further proof they're inadequate. It's like the secret flaw. Like even if they've got everything put together in what they pursue intellectually and the way they dress, but if they don't have that down, then, or their name, oh, well, you have dyslexia. It's not like they think, oh, wonderful. They're just, okay, you can't read properly. You need to learn how to read. You need this specialist, but it's not the good kind of special. It's the special that proves they're inadequate. So when they understand, yeah, that's hard for you, but notice where you positioned. Like I'll ask them to draw a clock, or a lot of different things I use, or little faces, and what's the emotion. I do all of them with people, whatever their vulnerability is. And then they see, oh yeah, I can't do that, but I'm creative in a way other people aren't. I have my own system that works. And then they modify it. So they have the adaptability of 3 focused on a very specific way to make something really stellar, not just their inadequacy. But if we look at any of the types where they feel inadequate, and if they understand these vulnerabilities, not just of their Enneagram type, but of their diversity, what their brain needs, then they can create actually the corresponding gift. And really, with the 4, it's the originality becomes even greater than the person who does not have it, because you see things out of order. Like if I look at a pencil, yeah, I'm holding it still here, but it's not what I see. My mind does this with it. And so it made me an extraordinary designer. But I didn't know that, but I couldn't draw well. It was all in here. So I had the people that could execute what I could see. But I saw it by accident because I couldn't get, maybe I would also do this, but it would just start doing it anyhow. And that's an extraordinary group. Yeah, for pattern recognition and seeing things in another way. And you see that a lot with people who have 4 in the Tritype, because they're naturally looking at things differently, especially if they have any type of dyslexia. All those pictures where find the animal in the complex picture, Or is that a woman's face or an old man with a hat or whatever it is? They see it all the time. That's part of the gift of pattern recognition, another one. And then the 5, we automatically type people who have they're on the spectrum enough that they don't lead with their emotion. They lead with how things should be. And they're usually kind of OCD about what they want. And if they're introverted, they'll think they're a 5. But actually, they could be any Enneagram type with that struggle. But the 3 will cover it more. And the 8 will say it's not important. And the 4 will say, well, I don't believe in that, and go off another direction. But that's the biggest mistyping and injustice for the self-pres introverted 6, is they think they're 5s, but then they wonder why they're smart, but they can't be that smart, because then they'll be targeted and they'll be hurt. And so they struggle with anything being seen about them that could make them vulnerable. Whereas the 5, on the other hand, they go together, we kind of expect it, but they're more wounded and they have fewer options. But if you teach them about their pattern recognition, how they can see the big picture and the little picture and put it together, and that other people can't, and we all have different things, then the 5 will thrive. And if they're not pushed to do what makes them uncomfortable, and they can pursue what they're interested in. Whereas I started to say with the 6 is that they'll do anything in their power to avoid being targeted as because if they're vulnerable, what happens? People are going to use it against them. And that's the greatest fear. They'll be caught off guard.
And then they'll be rejected, abandoned.
Yeah. And both 4 and 6 in particular have the fear of abandonment. It was never just 4.
Right.
Ronho always taught it was both. Now, here, let me give you an overall with ADHD. They have a fear of abandonment, regardless of the Enneagram type, because the fear is you'll be rejected for the thing you can't do, beginning with your family, that your family thinks you should do. And if
yeah, I have a question about that, Catherine. It's just coming up in my mind. It's a bit of a sidestep, I suppose, but for somebody who has neurodivergent traits, and you keep saying it, and it's so true that we start to see ourselves as less than or deficient, or that we're different than other people. And sometimes a strategy or a way to deal with that is higher levels of narcissism.
you got it. Yes.
Not always, certainly. I'm thinking of plenty of people where that's not the case, but I know of people where it is as well. So I just want to hear your opinion on that.
Oh, yeah. And you'll see that in particular with the types that are heart types, or that actually we can all do it, any Enneagram type. And then it's we'll find what we can do and dismiss, like in a narcissistic way, what we can't do as to being important. Like I was working with a doctor recently, and he was so smart, he could get away with a lot of things, but actually total ADHD. And he was a 3. And he figured out, if you just threaten people or not, made them feel inadequate, that they'd back off. And so he said, that's not important. Have someone else do that. I'm too busy doing this. Do you want me to get this done? And so that's where, the rise in our defensive or assertive, full on assertive or aggressive tendencies would come up. And here's the thing, some of those people truly are narcissistic. They've developed it as a defense strategy to feel safe. But some of them only have narcissistic wounding. And it all came from a parent that said you had to do that. Or if you don't do that, then you're not going to make it. Or if you don't get good grades, you're going to deal with that. And whatever the household punishment is. So they have to toughen up and close down their heart. That's why you'll see it a lot in heart types. But it could be any Enneagram type. It's when the 8 does not want their weakness exposed, so they expose yours. And then, wait, you think I have a problem? What about your problem with this, and this? And again, that's the reaction. And so that person may or may not be narcissistic, but you can tell if they're not, if you say, oh, I have things that are hard for me too. I don't have things that are hard for me. Well, maybe not, but I just noticed people are different, and they like doing things their own way. And as an aide that was in management for many, many years, every person I worked with needed it their way. And I go, yeah, that's not my way. So go ahead and do it your way, but then just translate it into my way, or I'm not going to understand what you're doing. And when you're getting rigid, you're going to feel like I'm making a mistake, or I'm going to feel like you're making a mistake, when neither of us are making a mistake. We're just trying to make sure we can hold the information or the situation in a way that makes sense to us.
Mm-hmm.
And the 7, I mentioned already, but their gift is that, well, their dilemma is that additional distractibility makes people think they're a flake and that they're, useless. But a lot of their avoidance and disappearing is they don't want to have to endure something that'll trigger their emotional pain. And having ADHD triggers their emotional pain. So they make it into an ideal. Oh, only really creative people can do that. Well, I guess you're not creative. And so they can get kind of sarcastic and say, but they'll disappear if something's going to require they not show that they have ADHD. But the gift with the 7 is that they can imagine scenarios and situations where it could work out. And provided we get into the right jobs, doing the things with our natural gifts, we're great. Like making an introvert go have to be the welcoming committee, and they don't like people. They're a 5. They're gonna probably be fired eventually because it's not going to work. So that's just true in life. But with these 2 coming together, it really kind of shows up in the way we can, like the 8 will have this unshakable desire to help the disenfranchised that are missing something that others have, if they understand this, because otherwise they're going to just think people are weak or useless. And self-pres 3 feels that way as well. But last but not least, with the 9, well, moving from the 8, fear of being controlled. So what are you going to do? You're going to make it not part of the game, so that you don't need it, you don't want it, because you can't show you can't do it. And but there's something else you can do. So maybe it would take me an hour to write an order because I had to check and recheck the math. That was terrible. But on the other hand, when they made me in charge of all the problems, and I had to go in and creatively figure out an event and make it so an account, the chain of stores wanted to still pass an order, which we needed. And of course, they needed, couldn't be overstocked. And I could just go through a book, 10, 15 minutes to tell you exactly what they were overstocked in, exactly the ads I was going to run, and the event I was going to create for the sell-through. Take that. Now, if I was identified with the fact that I had to check and recheck, check and recheck, I never would have been able to see that part of my capabilities. And so that's why we want to do that. But then when we move from that expansion to finding a way to support everybody and move towards the 9, the 9 one that can do something, they check out, they zone out. So their shutdown is zone out, whereas the 8 shutdown is I don't feel. And neither does the 9, because it's moving from 8 to 9. They go, it doesn't matter, no big deal. Oh, well, just the way it is. But the problem with ADHD is it amplifies disassociation, which is one of the 9's primary defense strategies. And when they can't do that, they will self-nurture with food or anything that, gives them pleasure, TV. Oh, yeah, I need to do the dishes now rather than chats. So none of us like doing those, but whatever it is, the 9 will do. So if they have ADHD, they just often will even just call themselves a loser. It's really sad. But they're not, because they're understanding, they're compassionate with others. And I have found actually that the empathy of a 9 with ADHD is extraordinary, because like the 8, maybe the 8 will go towards others to teach them, or 1 might, but the 9 just allows the person to vent, to be who they are. They don't judge them. So we see the allowing factor with the 9 that has ADHD or other versions of neurodiversity very quickly. And they don't always have 2 in the tritype. It's just 9 in and of itself. And all these are slightly modified depending on the tritype and instinctual stacking. But gosh, you know, when I look at the union of these, if we're looking at human motivation with the Enneagram, not what we do, but why we do it, and then we understand the behavioral part of, no, I can't do that. No, we have to do it this way. No, that's stupid. That's wrong. It just goes away. And we can easily say, oh, I can see that the way you get the information is this way. Can you say more about that? This is how I get it. What can we co-create to make the marriage better, the friendship better? And we can see it through the lens of the Enneagram type. But as I said, these common mistypings will occur because someone doesn't perfectly fit the Enneagram type. We can just casually mention our own struggles growing up and what kind of things did they excel at and what did they struggle with. And they'll quickly tell you because we all know them too well. But it has to be with us naming where we thought we did well, but where it was harder for us. And what did we not want to show? And most people with ADHD in particular, if you tell them the way you struggle and how embarrassing that was, they'll tell you what embarrasses them. And then you can tell them the gift of their, what was once thought of as a disability. In fact, the new thinking is that they're beautifully different. And most people are not going to buy that because they do not want to have those differences. But I will say that what comes out of it is that we have all ways of looking at things. So it is quite extraordinary to see the beauty in that context. Okay, as an editor, I would love an ISTJ or an ISFJ in Myers-Briggs. So that means someone who has a little OCD and someone who checks and rechecks. So maybe a 1, a 3, 9, provided, you know, all these variables are important is what I'm saying. But we can find our counterpart and it fills in these blanks. Like we think we want someone exactly like us because that's enjoyable, but it's people who fill in the blanks that also help us create a greater whole. And if we have a compassion and understanding by knowing our own strengths and weaknesses with the very same issues, it just makes the process working with people, whether it's a family member, a friend, a coworker, or a client, so much faster, just the way the Enneagram did for all of us.
Well, Katherine, you have just in general, you have so much information about the Enneagram, but even specific aspects of it. So typing, you have so much knowledge in that, in this, how subtypes can influence, how tritypes, and now we're talking about neurodivergence and more. So I can really see as you're talking how this interplay can really bring compassion and more accuracy to the typing process for people. It's really important.
Yes, because most people were thrilled when I created the test that could alert them if they needed to consider 6 or 9, because 6 and 9 and 3 are so adaptable that you don't really see what's going on because they're giving you what they think you want so that they can have balance and peace. But after a while, people who get on the internet, 6s were this that was bad, or the 2s were this, that all the types seem negatively. Then people would write me an email sometimes and say, your test insisted I was, you know, a 6, and blah, 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 and I didn't have a 6 in my test. Well, no, it's just alerting you you're using a pattern. And you might want to check it out. Or maybe you don't understand type 6 in its full dimension, because so many of the archetypes of 6 were lost in the dissemination of the Enneagram, because we as a culture started negatively talking about, through the use of the internet, incognito, of not being ourselves. We'd really slam a type that hurt us. 6 and 2 and 8 got it the worst, but all types can be slammed by someone that had an unhealthy version of that type. So then the 6s didn't want to be a 6. And they didn't, because they didn't want to be what? Exposed as vulnerable, and then they'd be targeted, and then they'd have to worry about what they had to worry about. So, but actually understanding if you have that pattern, even if you didn't choose the 6 card, it's programmed for everything I saw for many, many years in person working with people. And other types just don't change their mind when they're taking the test, except 6 and 9. Sometimes they'll choose this card and then that card, and then they end up with a totally different card in as their type, and a different card in their tritype. But all that does is let them know they don't understand something, which helps, or they could be seeking balance that 6 and 9 want. That's why I didn't need to create that test. It's just that I've reached an age, and after 40 years, or actually 35 years, I wanted people to accurately type sooner rather than later, because everything with the Enneagram works better if you're the right type. Otherwise, you're trying to fix a part that's not the true issue.
Yeah. Well, when I've talked with you before, I said, Katherine, I hope you get all this stuff in a book, and you have, and I'm so happy. Do you happen to have it there in front of you? If so, could you?
Yeah, the first one.
The first one, could you hold it up? Yeah, there it is. So I'm really excited. I have not read that yet, but I'm going to.
Well,
And
the reason I made it so people could buy the book, you can also get it for your iPad, or but so I could put all the charts in so people could look at the picture, have the chart. And this is where I have to thank my INTJ9 and other people, where they created all these charts, so that it makes it easier when you learn a concept to be able to then compare and contrast it throughout the book against everything, whether it's the holy ideas, whether it's the passions, fixations, and convictions, you name it. It's got the basics of the Enneagram in there, not just the advanced subtypes. And I will include that in my other book too, because people wanted one big book, but it was going to be about this big, and who can work with that? So it's ending up to, but yes, and I can see all those charts, and I need it because of my dyslexia. The minute I put something in a chart, and I found out 74% of the population does better if they could also look at a chart.
And I love that it's colored. It looks like it's
colored. I did the full color. Yeah. So wonderful. Yes, it's not all in there though. I've done so many correlations but I'm putting quite a few of them in.
I'm so glad you're getting this information out there. It's really important for all of us to have. And Katherine, thank you so much for sharing your incredible wisdom here and all your great insights. And I know there's a lot more that you have to say about it. So people can go to your book that's already out. You've got another one coming out this summer, which is really exciting. And then let me say your websites one more time here. Do I
Books
have
on Amazon, so you can order a printed copy.
Oh, you can order. Okay, you can. All right, great. So on Amazon. And your websites are katherinefauvre.com or enneagramtritypetest.com.
Right.
Okay. And do you have a free gift you'd like to tell the listeners about?
It'll be the free test to take the extended 10 tests in one that I'm talking about, that I use, that has the special programming to alert you if you should consider factors that are 6 or 9, and how to go from there. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Great. And
it'll be for a limited amount of time, but you can definitely take it if you sign up.
Okay, great. And folks, you can do that by just clicking the button below. It says free gift, so you can access it there. Okay, thank you, Katherine. I'll say
always a pleasure, Michelle.
Same here. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.